There are so many of us today that are dreaming of living in community, that are dreaming of returning to our tribal nature, living in connection with the land, growing our own food, and raising our kids together. In Costa Rica, there are so many people looking to fulfill this dream. And in today's episode, I'm bringing on someone who knows this terrain very well. Jason Thomas is my guest. I met him while he was doing a tour of the different eco-villages here in Costa Rica. Jason has a lot of knowledge and expertise, and this conversation was very enlightening for me. We spoke about how community has evolved since he initially came here many years ago, the different types of community in Costa Rica, whether or not community works, the future of communities in Costa Rica, and many other interesting subjects. If you appreciate this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I do hope to make more of this type of content in the future, and so I hope you enjoy. So hello and welcome, Jason Thomas. Thank you for saying yes and being willing to share your knowledge and expertise about eco-villages and intentional communities in Costa Rica. I'm really happy that you're sharing this space with me today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to chat with your audience and I don't know, share what I've learned in these trips. It has been quite a journey. A lot of things have changed in the way I see all this.
So I met you, Jason, last year during your Eco Village tour when I was visiting in one of the places that you took your participants to. And during that time, we shared a bit about the community vision that was aligned with the land at that time. I am no longer living there because it was not a place that was good for me to give birth. So I moved to somewhere more comfortable. And I'm still very much interested in intentional communities and in the whole movement. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about the terrain and what's going on in Costa Rica. So do you want to start by sharing a bit about yourself, especially with regards to your life in Costa Rica and with community living and the Eco Village tour?
Sure. I came down to Costa Rica in 2009, driving a veg oil school bus. I drove down from Minnesota with my partner and a couple of very young children. And we drove down here and, we were headed to Ecuador, but when we got to Costa Rica, we were quite impressed with the culture here on many levels. I think one of the most impactful right away was there's far fewer speed bumps than there are in many of the other countries. And when you're driving a school bus, unsigned speed bumps, they wear on you. So besides the freer movement of travel in that way, the police and the checkpoints that are every couple dozen kilometers in many of the other countries is not so prominent here. And even when there are checkpoints, they're really just checking to make sure all's good. They're not, trying to get a handout. So we decided to hang out, and we spent 3 more months driving around Costa Rica in our bus looking for communities. We were looking for a place to buy in as members and get to work. I do Thai massage and work with essential oils and catering and things like that, or at least I did more in those days. And I was looking for a retreat center type thing, and my partner was more of a permaculture teacher and wanted to teach permaculture and regenerate, a barren land. And, now that I say that, I really recognize that we never really talked about that difference. It was just kind of something I realized later. So we drove around, checked out a lot of places, made a lot of mistakes in our vetting process that I now help people do better with. We came down with a lot of ideals, kind of a picture in our mind, our list of everything our ideal community is going to have. And it's important to, obviously, you don't want to make a type A error and move somewhere where you can't have what you want. But being willing to be flexible in some things, or how those needs get met in unique and creative ways, or create ways to meet them that aren't initially there. So I think we passed on some opportunities that might have been really awesome community building opportunities for us, because they were missing some elements, but the connections were there, the relationships were there. And we were like, oh, but your place doesn't have this and that. And we kept moving. And we ended up in the end buying our own farm. We were impatient. We were a little road weary, half a year on a school bus with a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, you know. We were just ready to hunker down, I think. And I also now advise people, don't do that. Just rent for a while. Hang out. Don't be in a hurry to buy land right away. If you can't be here for a whole season or a couple of seasons, then just take your time. There's always going to be places to be. The main, most important thing is to find your tribe. And starting something, a lot of people tell me, oh, I want to start my own community and all of this. And it's like, it takes a lot, and it takes a lot out of you. Especially if you don't have a team and a lot of resources. So, but we did that. And I had a lot of experience from my years on the road visiting communities around North America, and my partner had resources. And so we just got to it. And for the first few years, we pushed and we built. We had a baby during that time, and people looked at us like we were crazy for how fast we were building our infrastructure and hosting one festival after another and hosting volunteers and all living communally. And I even opened a store in town during that time to do body work and have bioregional council meetings with all these other projects in the area. And yeah, so went at it strong. We were living it full on for a lot of years. And then things changed, and we got married, and then we separated after many years. And another man came into our family, and things evolved as they did. But we still stayed as a family unit, even though romantically things changed. But our son that was born here had some genetic. Well, he didn't speak, and we knew it was more than that. He had some other slow to do this, slow to do that. And so we decided to go back to the States after 7 years down here to get him looked after. And that was a big deal for me, culture shock. All of a sudden, after, 6 years on the road and then 7 years in Costa Rica, I was like in a cold, flat city in the United States. It put a lot of things in perspective for me. A lot of my ideals, things that I'd been trying to avoid all of my life, now were important. Like not having a job history or a credit history or work history, a rental history, none of that. Like, yeah, I really went through big changes there, and I got into entrepreneurship and wanted to learn how to make our efforts do better than they did before, because we struggled a lot, for many reasons. And so when I came back at the end of 2019, I focused on fixing up my farm, and I tried bringing all, my business sense that I'd learned to the project, and then the pandemic happened, and there just was no business to have in that realm. And so we focused on fixing the place up. And then by the time it was fixed up, after a couple of years, I was putting together documents to start to attract in. I was looking for a community online, people that were congealing online already, like making agreements, talking about how they want to do it, and then looking for land together. I was looking for people at that stage that we could maybe like sell half of our project to, and that they could come in and occupy the cabins we'd built. And then maybe I would just be like, hey, you guys are cool, I'll can I join your community kind of thing, and stay there if that was in the highest good. But ultimately, that didn't happen. And my land partners weren't available for the changes needed to invite that kind of significant change to the project. And so then I left. And I moved down to the Diamante Valley where I met you at the home farm there. I was living working with the DBC that the home farm was part of at the time, and this Diamante Bridge Collective. And I got really attracted to this idea of regional community and bringing together. I always had been. When I had that store in town and we were doing the Bioregional conferences for Pedro Celedon area, and people were coming together monthly, even weekly, for small circles to talk, and always felt like there was a high potency in that. And so for the last few years since I left my farm, that's what I've been focusing on, has been regional community and connecting and networking these individual communities so that they can support each other in better ways and do things better, because there's definitely things that can be done better in this whole movement. So that's what's brought me to my focus today. And the Eco Village Tours is actually a company owned by Cynthia Tina, who was the program director for IC.org for many years. That's how I know her. I used to watch her webinars she'd put on interviewing leaders in the movement. And she was an ambassador for GEN, the Global Eco Village Network, and New Moon and other organizations. So Cynthia, I contacted and said, hey, I love what you're doing. She started a Community Finders program, which I'm now facilitate a monthly mastermind for, and for people looking for community. And anyhow, I reached out. I love what you're doing. I just want to let you know I'm here. So that started the relationship. And then she hit me up the following year and said, hey, I want to do these Eco Village tours, and I got a lot of people interested in Costa Rica. Would you help me design them and drive the first tours? And I was already interviewing founders of these places for another program that I'm working on, a convergence to bring founders together. And so, yeah, that started my relationship with Eco Village Tours, and Cynthia and I hit it off, and the tours were great, and the feedback was wonderful, and so we did it again this year. She didn't join me on the trips, but she's a very active part of the team, and so I did 2 more trips this year, and we're scheduling 3 for next year, and an immersion retreat to teach people about best practices for vetting communities and for just how to prepare oneself to be a good community member. So those are all things. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, I'll make sure to add those links down below in the description box so people can check them out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So obviously the terrain then for the community terrain is very different now in 2025 than I imagine it was in 2009 when you arrived. So what's the scene like now? Like, I know it's a broad question, but what's going on in Costa Rica with communities in general?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that's changed is, obviously the internet accessibility and of signal for one, and online tools and freelancers. Like in 2009, most places didn't have internet. Like we were rocking like the 1 megabyte speed. Like it was, we had a satellite dish on the, there just wasn't, you could do emails pretty much. We weren't having video calls. So, yeah, and just online directories and websites, like everything was very new, and also like IC.org kind of was going, but it wasn't very well curated, the list. And so it's kind of hard to find places. Only a handful of places had a decent SEO expert on staff that made their place pop up in a Google search, if they had a website at all, So there's much there's many more ways to find places, and their websites are going, and I think they have a better chance to succeed now too, for many of those same reasons, that members can live on site for longer of the year because they can work, because they have high speed internet. The culture around how to communicate what you have on a website has grown more sophisticated. Being in touch with your audience is easier to keep people interested and knowing about you and spreading the word. So I think that places have a better chance of making it these days than when finding out about them was so difficult. But even still, you know, I've been searching for communities in Costa Rica actively for years, since I started my podcast 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm still finding out places. I'm like, wow, you exist. And I'm like, yeah, well, you know, we're kind of here. We're a few families. We got a thing. We've been setting foundation, but we're not really public about it yet and all of that. So there's a lot of those projects as well. And myself being in the position that I'm now in, I'm starting to learn more about them. And so I've got a growing list, a database, my own database that, so I provide matchmaking calls now, community connections calls, where I'll talk with people and interview them about what they're really looking for and help them discern what they're really looking for beyond the front-facing snapshot they have in their mind when they think about what they're looking for, trying to run away from. And then I send a curated list of locations, contact information, a map, other resources and stuff to help fast track people's search. Because again, like, I spent 3 months in my bus. We spent lots of resources, money, whatever, time traveling around, just following breadcrumbs, trying to find places. So I know how difficult it is. And we had our own house and kitchen and everything. So we were able to do it relatively on the cheap. But when you're renting or trying to rent in these places, sometimes it can be really expensive. And food is not cheap in Costa Rica if you're eating out. And, you know, just everything, the cost of stuff goes up. And so that's why the tours that we're doing now are saving people a ton of time and money in their search. And these calls too are also really helping people get to because I'll tell you, in my years here, that's been one of the hardest things to see, is floods of people come. I have hosted so many people at my farm looking for community and elsewhere and interviewing these places. So much energy gets lost by people just showing up and following the breadcrumbs.
Yep.
And they get wrapped up in social scenes and this and that and personal things, and they lose, and then they're driving all the way across the country to visit a place for a few days, and then they come all the way back to their home base, and then they like shoot off somewhere else, and they're all few and far between, and they're limiting the amount of time they stay because they're like budget, and it's like hard to really plan. It's really hard doing it, and I'm only able to do it because of the amount of people I'm bringing and that I'm paying these founders to show up for us. Like, you don't just show up to a lot of these places and chat with the founder a lot of times, you know? And so, anyhow, yeah, I guess I'm getting a little bit more into the value of the tour, but the things that have changed in Costa Rica, to your question, have been the accessibility of the place, the ability to find out about them, and that's just really becoming easier. It still can be challenging, but the ability for members to live on site and make money might be the single biggest change that is going to give more currently starting projects a better chance than ones that started and fizzled in my earlier years here.
But I see so many people coming to Costa Rica saying, yeah, we're looking for community. And yeah, it's that story of then they're just kind of following the breadcrumbs, as you say, and it's so much energy, it's so many resources, and it's exhausting, and they end up just going home or buying their own land and just saying, too bad, we can't make community happen. So I'm happy to hear that there are people out there like you who are supporting that, because right now, for example, I know somebody that's trying to build a project in the valley, in the Diamante Valley, and I guess someone like that could go to you, and then maybe you would have candidates who would be interested in supporting that type of project, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Cynthia does globally with her Community Finders network, is she helps people find communities all over the world. And now I am handling all of that for Costa Rica. And so, yeah, it's really valuable because a lot of these places, like, they don't have the best SEO expert. Nobody's going to find them, you know, but they have heart and they're doing things really sweet and intentional and are looking for their team. You know, and they are having a hard time. And so they need people like, you know, us that are sharing their stories on podcasts and media. And then, you know, things like these tours and these consulting calls that are, you know, really bringing people to the right place, because there's so much nuance in the context of each place. And that's the trickiest spot, is that, you know, this is really, unless you're just buying a lot in a development neighborhood, which is not a bad path toward community. You know, some of these regenerative neighborhoods that I once judged as not really being community in my book because they didn't have like agreement documents and group governance and decision making and all of that very challenging stuff. But having visited them, I recognize that as long as, you know, as long as it's free of significant corruption and there's, you know, some genuinely good-hearted, well-intending people at the core that are, in most cases, the commonality is that they're pooling people's resources together so that they can regenerate the land and build shared infrastructure like roads, sanitation, electricity, water, etc., for members of the project to use. Maybe a yoga shala and other expensive things that people are pooling their money in to buy. They're buying a lot, far more expensive than it would to buy it outside of the community gates, but because they have access to all the shared stuff. So these people are designing these neighborhoods and selling lots to people who want to live in a regenerative focused neighborhood. And while there is generally, I've in a conversation I had recently with someone at Ecovia San Mateo, we were just talking about the natural rate of attrition with a project like that. Like there's people that initially buy into something that's not quite there yet, and they think they want it, and then people start living there, and then those initial investors and so forth, they start being like, oh, this isn't really for me, and then so there's like a second and sometimes a third generation of sales that goes through that, because the people that do end up rooting there end up ultimately creating the culture. And even if it's not formally, their essence essentially creates a culture, their interactions. And so over time, you know, the community develops. And that's something Marat at the ARC mentioned, and I might not quote him accurately, but essentially that you can't really build community. You can build an environment and container that's conducive for community to develop. And I think that's really actually such an important thing for us to keep in mind as community developers and as community seekers, is that, you know, we come from I want it, I buy it society, or I want it, I build it, or pay someone to build it for me society. And community isn't a thing like that. Community is this amorphous culmination of energetic signature, and it's all about the interactions.
For sure.
And so what ends up happening as people start interacting with intention in a region, be it a bioregion or a gated community or a neighborhood, is that these interactions start creating a culture in real time. And even, you know, sometimes if there's a really strong leader that's like the center point of a community, if they leave, things fall apart, right? But if it's a more decentralized phenomenon, then anybody can be there or not be there, and the culture can maintain and continue to morph contextually. And that's really what community is. And so you can't build that, and you can't buy that, and you can't move into it expecting that as soon as you show up, everyone's going to be like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that you're here. Finally, you that we love so much and want to give all of our time and attention to. People expect that. We feel entitled to that because of the fantasies that we've been handed. And that's not reality. And I caution people from going out looking for community. And when they show up somewhere and being like, wow, nope, nobody, took my hand and guided me through the welcome to community, dear renter of a month or 3, they got other things going on. And honestly, like, not to, disrespect the quality of any person, but none of us are that important as a stranger coming in that everybody should be dropping what they're doing to, like, greet us and make us feel welcome as if they need us to move there and be part of their lives. Like, that comes more naturally. Or it comes because everybody bought in and once a year they all show up to the big week-long member party and they all love seeing each other at the annual party and they feel a community and they can't wait to live together someday. And, then that can be a more instant, fast bonding, that can happen. But it's a different sense, it's a different style, flavor, essence of community. And so that's, yeah.
What are the communities, what are the types of communities, like, briefly, that you see? So you talked about the more, how did you call it, where you just sort of buy a lot and you build your house and that's it. There's that form, but what are the types of communities that you see, and which are the ones that are generally the most long lasting?
Right. Thanks for saying that. I wanted to just finish the thought about the regenerative neighborhood model. What I came to there and what I was going to at that bridge of what is community is, like, that community, if the mission and the theme will eventually become what's intended. And that's something I want to say about those neighborhoods. Even though there might not be agreements and formal meetings and all of this stuff or weekly song circles that we think are like some of the really great elements that make a community strong, they end up developing. And so patience is important too. Community is a long game, and people that are like the tours are great for, like, boom, 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 boom. I got to, like, speed date, and that there's a lot of use in being able to do speed dating, and that's kind of what the tours are. But yeah, anyhow, just there's something for everybody, and I feel like there's a lot of community to be had in those regenerative neighborhoods for the people that are patiently willing to be the foundation of them. So, and when you go and you see something else, then, we focus on what we bring with us. Yeah. So regarding different types of communities, I'm writing a blog series right now. And one of the blogs in that series is about, categorizing communities. What are the different types? And, this is just my take. Cynthia's got another blog that she wrote that maybe I'll share a link with you as well, and it's she broke down, like, several different co-housing type models and so forth that she finds that are more relevant, I think, to the United States and Europe ecosystem than down here. But for down here, what I've decided, or what I've determined, you've got, like, these differences between collective ownership and decision making. That's, like, one style. Some places are really into that collaborative governance. And on the other side, you've got these, like, sovereignty focused neighborhoods. They've got some shared infrastructure, but otherwise, people kind of aren't really needed to be much more than themselves, good neighbors. Maybe some of them come together for autonomously create co-creations, Then there's another theme, like places that have a retreat center or an education center as a focus. That's something that some people really want because it gives a little bit of an economic engine. It's great. It's a good model because it has something to help cover some of the development costs of the project and have a little bit of economic opportunity for members, also helps in employing the local community that these communities move into. However, some people don't like that because they don't really want to have a bunch of strange people coming to the place. Some people just want their neighborhood, and I'll tell you, as someone who lived in an education center for a dozen years or so, like it's a lot to have people coming through all the time. Then you've got some that they have a strong focus on integrated mutual aid programs within their local village, right? Like Rancho Mastatal, Brave Earth, Verde Energia. These are a few examples of places that are really working, Seed Eco Village in the Caribbean, that are really working with the local population in an integrated mutual, not outreach, but mutual aid way. And that's really, for me, become a core focus of my work in the coming year, which I might share some about. Then there's some that are more family-friendly focused. They might have a school or help support an alternative school nearby. Senior-friendly. Some places just aren't. And it's not by any badness. It's just they're super hilly. The pathways are uneven. And, it's a lot to invest into the infrastructure to have like super manicured pathways everywhere or have paved roads through the whole place or whatever other, or to have land on a property that's mostly flat. So senior friendly is kind of a niche. Some places have rental options, some don't. These are places people live. They're not all tourist attractions.
Yeah, that's one thing. So many people come here and they're like, I want to visit communities, but I think a lot of people just want to live their lives.
Yeah.
They don't want tons of tourists. And it's a lot of them are just small projects, like you were saying, that are not on Google if you search communities in Costa Rica, and are probably not even on ic.org.
No.
And are really just keeping it in the down low and getting the word out to really the people that they feel are in strong integrity.
Yeah.
And resonance.
And that brings up another share that I offer. Is it a lot of people? They have the stigma like, oh, community doesn't work. People are always in conflict. There's always, and it's just because that's what you hear about. You only hear about the drama. You don't hear about the chill stuff. You don't hear about people just harmoniously living their lives and sharing stuff and looking after each other's kids and having a little music circle now and again. You just don't. You hear about the drama. And
but the
truth is that I think what's probably the greatest number of people living in community in Costa Rica don't have a website. There's just a few families that bought land together, and they share whatever they share, and they go about their way, and they don't have a sign out front. They're just their little neighborhood.
So is that what you would say it makes community work is simplicity and being small? Like the ones that are successful, because we always hear, community is so hard to build, but that's because people have such big visions. And
well, I mean, there's something for everyone. Some people want that. They want to just buy land with somebody, and so that they're not alone out in the mountains, and get on with life. The simplicity that they sought. And they might even have some little neighborhood agreement documents. And actually, it's something that we're instigating here. The Tico family that owns our neighborhood, we're calling their family that owns some of the different houses here, to a circle next week with some of us renters to talk about the culture of our neighborhood and create some agreement documents so that when new people rent here, they just know like things like, hey, yeah, I know we all like to live, some of us like to be naked in the river, but that also means that the owner's kids don't come to the river now because there's naked hippies in the water. And so let's change that and say that we agree that if we want to be naked at the river, we're going to go over there where it's not the direct public access, so that some faith can be built that kids can go to the river again. Like, this is one of those entitlement pieces that a lot of people come in with that Ticos are very timid to talk about. And so creating some kind of agreements, even just upon the things that are important, even if it's not like a big decision-making document and all of this, is really important, and some places have that. And I think that's actually more of an important piece than size. Some people want to be part of something big. They want to be part of something big. They want to be part of that retreat education center, transformational center. They want to have people coming through having transformational experiences, or they want to live in a neighborhood big enough to have a school and a yoga shala that they can use and bring people to, or do whatever, and like that they could market their little micro business to a whole neighborhood of progressive minded people. Like, some people want to be part of a big project like that, and that comes with social governance. And, a lot of people move to community fantasizing about indigenous ways, and this is something I wrote about in my Seeking Utopia blog, is that the conditions that those ancestors lived in do not exist anymore and are pretty much impossible to recreate within a single generation. They're only lived that way so easily because cultural norms were just the only available worldview to have. So people fell in line and supported each other and trusted each other, and like, people weren't ripping each other off and afraid to leave their bags around because we're just all family. We don't live in that world anymore. And to bring multiple people together from different countries and cultures and personalities and worldviews and preferences and wounds and shames and addictions, and to imagine that they're going to, within a single generation, be operating in some kind of seamless harmony that can be looked at and approved by an onlooker as like, oh, they have their shit together. It's just not a fair thing to expect. It's a huge experiment to bring people together in a project like this. And it's not for the faint at heart, and it's not for the judgmental either. It's for people that are really willing to give more than they receive, to humble themselves, to do transformational work, and to be more forgiving and softer and allowing and curious and participatory. And people that want that for just a few months out of the year, they want to go like, they live in their community for a few months and then go back to their city life and have their community be, everything like that indigenous ideal type of scenario. Like, that's just not fair. It's not. And
that's one thing I hear about a lot, is how people come in for a couple months, they want to build this community, but then they leave. And it's like, well, what happens to the community when you're not there?
Yeah. I mean, it's cool if that's what you got to do, but adjust your expectations about what's going to be waiting for you that you bought. You got to cultivate too. And the fruits will come with the cultivation. And if you aren't the one doing the cultivating, you're not going to be the one who understands the fruits. So, yeah, that's definitely an element that comes in. So rental, we kind of went off from rentals being available or not in some communities. There's some that are eco-luxury. I think too many of them, I don't know. Everyone's got their value level of what luxury is and too expensive is, or something like that. But there are some that are clearly marketing to the wealthy, and they've got very fancy everything. And if you're going to build there, you're expected to build at least not shoddy. Then you got some places that are more bioregional community hubs. And that bioregional community revillaging a place where people are already living by bringing in more community dynamic elements like neighborhood agreements and events and things like that. So that's something else. Sometimes these bioregional community hubs aren't huge land projects. They're a small group of people, but they're really affecting largely the area around them. Rancho Mastatal is an example of a core team of 6 people that when they talk about their community, they're talking about all of Mastatal, you know. Here, Awake is another place. It's just owned by a couple of guys, but and one of them's not even here, but then you've got a team of half a dozen other people that have been there for some years that are holding it down, doing good things, people in the region that are coming there to all their events frequently and to their meetings and experimenting. Like there's community happening there, but they're not a community that you buy into and join and have like a little residential neighborhood in the same way as, say, Alegria Village, right? Then the last category I have here is deep restoration and deep sustainability, land restoration and deep sustainability. And that really is just to differentiate. They all have an eco focus of some degree or another, but some of them have like reforestation projects or, you know, when they've got dynamic food forests and water management systems and everything all over the property. And when you buy your lot, it's surrounded by, you know, and they've got like even like some places have biodigesters set up for the community. And, you know, so this is kind of the last category I have on my list.
Thank you. It's very interesting to see all the possibilities and how everyone can really find something that's catered to their needs. Yeah. What do you see as the future of communities, especially in Costa Rica? Where are things going?
Left to how they are now, it could be a slow growth, experimental hodgepodge of projects making it to one degree or another, and some continuing to fall off, which is likely to be the case anyhow. However, my interests are in fast tracking the success rate by bringing people together. And so like this June, I'm planning a community builders convergence for founders and members of these different communities that I've been interacting with, to come together, get to know each other, network, and to have some group discussions around unique topics that no one person or place has figured out yet. And because there are common challenges, and I truly believe, having interviewed all these places and been to many of them, that the one thing they're all missing is each other. And that if we can come together and have some mastermind type conversations where a group mind is formed that's smarter than the individual parts, that we have the opportunity to see the impact potential of these projects increase. And so that's part of my work right now, is understanding, supporting, but also uniting these different projects. And I think with that, the future has tremendous potential. On another note of something that I'm working on currently, it's a plan to generate a circular economy within a bioregion, and it uses offering economic opportunities to incentivize regeneration of land, growing food organically, providing more products for local consumption. And if I can pull this off and get this incubated up here in our region to the degree that I think I can, then I'll have something to share. And that is also something that will profoundly improve the impact potential of these projects. If they have some tool that they can use their collaborative energy to get behind, that can directly empower and interactions with and trade with their local community, because my experience here is that anything that's primarily foreigner based struggles because foreigners leave. All of us do at some time or another leave. And it's understandable that to make these big infrastructures, you need money, and the people who have money are often not locals. And locals already have their own sense of community oftentimes around where they've been living for generations. They're not hungry for it like those of us in such disembodied cultures as we've come from. So the communities themselves are not very often have local Costa Rican members, although some do. But if these communities can integrate better with their local population that they moved in amidst in a two-directional way, mutual aid, then the potentials are unforeseeable because we don't have, because it's just, I mean, it is kind of foreseeable. Like you can see impacts of the few places that are doing that, but on a whole, nationwide, to be able to shift the culture of these communities, because let's be honest, you know, from the local standpoint, this community movement of foreigners moving to Costa Rica, many of them have labeled it as gentrification and neocolonialism, and not without good reason. There are a lot of projects popping up doing whatever the heck they want to do, and it's not cool.
For sure.
And it's there are so many things, and that's another thing that'll be part of my blog series is immigration without gentrification. Because there are things that we can do to be better immigrants here. And so I think really the whole movement is dependent on that, because that's why I said if left as it is, it'll flounder along and people just try to figure it out and keep reinventing the wheel and dealing with their inadequacies and social resistance from the local population, and then other people being disenchanted because of that. Like, but if we can change that, then we have really profound potential to be an example of how, you know, I don't know, and it is tricky. The gentrification thing is tricky. Us coming in with all of our new ideas and our new ways and our new resources and customs and preferences, and being able to really be connected, integrated neighbors with the human individuals that have been living here for so long, requires making language learning has to be the top priority. You're just not doing it right if you don't speak Spanish. Have you been living down here for more than a couple of years and you're not speaking Spanish? You're not doing it right. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it harmful compared to how helpful you could be. And until people come down here breaking free of some of their entitlement mentality, I'm not super excited about the community movement down here. And that's why I do the work that I do. And that's why I put out the education I do. And I host bilingual town halls on community, you know, neocolonialism and cultural bridging. And here in our region, we're having gentrification meetings with the local population to have voices be heard. You know, I'm talking to some people who are creating a regional language school to start promoting more language teachers. You know, like, there's so many things with having neighborhood agreements, so many things we can do to connect with the local population and really, truly be people of the land, not people who come here of a land and entitledly say, what, I'm from the land. You know, there's more. There's a richness to the different cultures here in Costa Rica, and it's not one culture. The mountain culture is different than the beach culture. The Pacific's different than the Caribbean culture. There's many different cultures. And so taking the time to drop into the nuances of our regional cultures is the best chance any of these community projects has to thrive when we have the next economic storm or viral storm or whatever other lockdown, where regional resilience is our salvation. And so that's a big part of my message these days.
Thank you. It's a really important thing that you note. The gentrification issue is such a big one. There's so much that could be said about it. And I really appreciate your share. Thank you. What do you, as a last question, what do you wish, I mean, you've already touched on this, you pretty much answered it, but what do you really hope to see emerge? Is that it? Basically just more of a shared economy between the locals and the foreigners, or in the community landscape? Like, what's your hopes?
Shared economy only comes in because it's meeting people where they're at. You know, if we want people to meet more often and talk more often and make agreements more often and collaborate on projects and events more often, one of the big things that keeps them, the two big things that keeps people from enthusiastically pursuing that are language. If they don't understand the language, they're not going to be interested in being there. And finances, like, I got to work. I can't go to that thing, you know. So when we can create some collaborative economic opportunities, then we have a reason to come together and meet. That is like, people are like, yeah, I could afford to do that. I can have that meeting. And you generate more interaction, trade, currency, fluidity, connection. And from that, more what I really see as, you know, my hopes is to have, I mean, I visualize Costa Rica and many other pockets of the planet like it becoming ecosystems of bioregions that are filled with people self-organizing themselves to be more, to provide more of their own needs locally, not to become an isolated bubble, but to become resilient enough that if the world turns us into isolated bubbles, we're ready for that. And that we're doing it in a collaborative and open sourced way so that other bioregions that are practicing these types of sociocratic or whatever type of organizational models to come together for the social good, that they can communicate with each other, they can trade amidst each other, and that we can, you know, really bring a new culture that is, and it's a delicate thing to say because the Costa Ricans don't want to hear about us bringing a new culture. They're very much offended in many cases that we don't embrace their culture. And so it's a very sensitive approach. And in fairness, I recognize that there's many parts of what they identify as their culture that are not their culture. Their industrialized culture that has been imposed upon them, that they've only known for a generation or two, enough to forget what their true culture is. And so that has to be said softly and caringly, but I believe that that true Costa Rican culture of relationship building or relationship based interactions and decision making can be unburdened by the constraints that come with financial scarcity. And so when we're not in that scarcity, we can come back to the more openness, taking the time to talk about the social good. Right now we got meetings that talk about the roads and the water systems and stuff, but I see that happening more on bioregional levels, and I think that it needs to start in neighborhood levels, and these community projects that we came together to talk about are highly potent neighborhoods to seed this type of practice and mentality. And yeah, but it all is going to take time. and patience and forgiveness and grace.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. That was really insightful. I learned so much from this discussion, so I'm really satisfied with the information that you shared. I can tell that you're a wealth of knowledge and you really know what you're talking about in the area. So thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Like I said, I'm writing it all out right now, but this has been my first interview on this particular topic. So yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
So where can people find you?
Okay, lots of places. So my brand is Regeneration Nation Costa Rica. That's at Regeneration Nation CR in all the places. And then the ecovillagetours.com /Costa-Rica, if that's the particular tour you want to take. But you'll find that we have tours coming up in Portugal and France and Slovenia, I think, this year, and then we'll go back to Hawaii and maybe back to India. So it's Vermont. So there's lots of tours that you could look into at Eco Village Tours. And the Community Connections call, I'll just share you a link to that. I forget the URL for it. I think it's just my website, regenerationnationcr.com /community-connections. Mm-hmm. Oh, and if anybody's curious about the Circular Economy Incubator Plan, it is all open source, and you can go to my website /CEI and learn more about that. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. We'll link everything that you just said in the description box so people can find it easily.
That'll be best for most.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.